This program, as you pointed out, is not about the driver or the driver's contributory negligence. This is about the automobile and whether or not it had a defective switch. People who resolved their claims years ago with GM, not knowing about this, we'll allow them to reopen their claim, come back into this program. We'll provide additional compensation.
Okay.
We want to do the right thing.
But they give up their right to sue the company, obviously.
If they voluntarily decide, yes, Mr. Feinberg, we'll accept this compensation, and yes, we'll sign a release only after we know what it is you're going to provide us, and then we'll sign that release.
What if someone says, all I have, Ken, is my word of mouth and perhaps some statements from family members who knew I owned this car or who knew this happened? What do you do in that scenario?
Did those statements of those family members, were they made to the police at the time of the accident? If all they have 10 years later is basically nothing, there was an accident in an eligible vehicle,
right,
and we just think it was the ignition switch.
No.
Well, no, so far, but we will then work with that claimant. Well, let's go back together and try and find some documentation that will corroborate your claim. Word of mouth now, 10 years later, oh, it must have been the ignition switch. That's a problem. But there are so many different ways that you can find circumstantial evidence that it was the ignition switch, like a police report, like a maintenance report 2 weeks before the crash. My car is stalling, the steering wheel is sticking.
Some sort of record, then.
Some sort of record.
Ken, you've spoken about how you are being compensated by General Motors. They're paying you for this. And so those have raised questions about how independent, despite your record, we know your stellar record in this, Ken, there are questions about your independence. How do you prove that you really are independent?
There's only one way to prove it. All the words in the world won't satisfy people. Is the money going out? Are we being generous? Are we finding claimants who are eligible? The criticism about my independence is entirely understandable. It really is.
You knew that was going to come.
Oh, it happened with BP.
Right. They paid you.
Yes, it's entirely understandable. And the only way you overcome that skepticism about true neutrality and independence, what do the statistics show? How many claims were paid? How generously were they paid? How quickly? Did he, in fact, pay these claims within 90 days?